All right, man, peace. So for many of you brothers who've been following my platforms for over a year now, you'll know that in the middle of 2019, I released a video based on the demise of the formerly famous and infamous rapper from the LA area, Nipsey Hussle. Actually, I produced two videos. The first video, the primary video on the subject, I believe was entitled Nipsey Hussle and the Intelligent Thug Program to Destroy Black Men, something along those lines. And basically what I was trying to convey in that video is that it is the intention of the mainstream liberal media to deify and lionize quote unquote thug Negroes, really the thug archetype, because that's the model that they want to establish for the so-called black man, because they know that they've removed the father from the household. So now there is no longer any real concept of patrilineal descent within the so-called black household. So now the environment is awash with the quote-unquote feminine energy. That's why people are so emotional, so mentally unstable, because the woman by nature is emotionally unstable. And of course, I'm not talking about every single woman, but the vast majority of them are emotionally unstable. That's why they're supposed to be living in a house with a man of wisdom, so that he can counterbalance a lot of her emotional instability. And she can also act as a stay and a support and a helpmeet to that man, because nothing makes a man feel better than a good woman. The woman was created to be God's gift to the man. So now that those two entities have been separated, there's so much contention on either side, and the energies have become imbalanced. Now these young so-called black boys, they're filled with the feminine energy. So they don't know how to conduct themselves out here in the street. They don't know how to react and respond to situations. None of us are perfect. All of us are or will flip out over something. Hopefully it won't go too damn far, but just getting back to the point. The reason why I entitled that video the way that I did is because it was obvious to me that the mainstream liberal media was trying to cast Nipsey Hussle as this martyr, knowing that subconsciously it was going to cause young so-called black men to try to mimic him and follow him down his path of destruction. And he did play a quote-unquote Horus or Attis or Tammuz figure, being killed at 33 years old at 3:30 p.m., so on and so forth. The numerology really signified what it was, that being a ritualistic removal, along with many of the other components that I laid out in the video that I did entitled Why Was Nipsey Hussle Killed? But for the sake of this video, I just want to go over something that transpired in the New York City area back in March. And once again, this is something that the mainstream liberal media will do. They'll dig up many of these incidents that occurred months ago, as long as they fulfill certain ritualistic or esoteric aspects or components. In this story here, I'm talking about the person Daniel Prude, the mentally disturbed, drug-addicted so-called black man who was killed by the police. He was 41 years old. He was high on PCP. All of those details are very important, as I'm going to detail over the course of this video. But once again, brothers have to understand, whenever they project these racialized stories nationwide, is because they already know what the intent is going to be and what the significance is on both a two-dimensional and a three-dimensional level. On a two-dimensional level, they're trying to subconsciously program the so-called black man, number one, to believe that he's a victim. Number two, that he has no hope. Number three, that everywhere he turns, he should be scared and afraid. Number four, that there should be no distinction between good decision making and bad decision making, and how it results in how your life is going to be impacted. They want the black man to be scared out of his fucking mind, the so-called black man. And they know as long as you're scared, you're always going to be looking to them for support and succor. They don't want us to find our own solutions for the problem, because they have no respect for you. That's on a two-dimensional level. And once again, it is an attempt to reinforce the degenerate black man as the so-called black man, period. You never see any stories about black men who are business owners or who are coming home from work, at 7 p.m. to see their children and their wives. You never see any stories about them getting killed by the police. And that does happen. Those are real racial incidents. But in the case of Daniel Prude and Jacob Blake and George Floyd, these are degenerate black men that they want us to think were killed or removed just because they were so-called black, as opposed to being what they were, which were degenerates. Brothers, we cannot allow the degenerate black man to become the standard or the archetype or the paradigm for black manhood. We have to create the separation, the distinction, and the understanding when it comes to why their lives were ended. Now, could it be that if they were so-called Caucasian, they'd still be alive today? Maybe. But I have news for you. Anyone who's seen the website worldstarhiphop.com can tell you there are many videos up of unarmed Caucasian men getting gunned down by the cops, or Caucasian men who were bugged out of their minds on drugs and had a gun or a knife in their hands, and they were just standing at distance and they got gunned down by the cops. It happens all the time. But the mainstream liberal media wants the so-called black man to believe that the low-level black man should be the example for all black men, that he should be the standard for all black men, that he should be someone that we should look to and feel sorry for and sympathy for. And that's not the case. A lot of these dudes are just getting their judgment for decades and decades of bad decisions. That's why they roll out their arrest record and and their rap sheet. So-called black people say that all the time. Oh, why is it that whenever these black men get killed by the cops and they were unarmed, they roll out the rap sheet? It's because the only reason why they reported that story is because they knew that the so-called black man had a rap sheet a mile long. They're not going to make a segment about Malcolm Jones, father of 3, who owns his own business and lives at home with his wife, his children, and his dog, who got pulled over by the cops for having a nice car and got shot in the head. They're not going to report that story. They are going to report the story about the other Malcolm Jones, who's been a Bloods gang member for 15 years, sells drugs to his own people, and happened to get killed by the cops because he had a warrant out for his arrest. So he resisted arrest when he was pulled over for a broken tail light and they shot him. They are going to report that because they want that image of the so-called black man to be what's propagated all across the nation and all across the globe. But anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Hitting the gas and then hitting people. A car plows through a crowd as protesters clash in Times Square.
Brothers, the term protesters, especially in this day and age in 2020, is just code word for losers who are most likely bisexual, pansexual, transsexual, homosexual, globalist, etc. I promise you that almost every single protester fits into one of those categories. They do not want the so-called black man to stand alone and to represent his own platform. Your platform always has to be represented by this large group of people from various backgrounds who the one thing they have in common is how mentally fractured and psychologically unstable they are.
Good evening, I'm Christine Johnson.
I'm Maurice Dubois. It all happened during a Black Lives Matter march, and tonight we have learned the driver police are looking for was part of a counter-protest in support of President Trump.
CBS 2's Ali Bauman live now in Times Square with...
Could be part of a counter-protest in support of President Trump, or it could be someone who's in the NYPD and just decided to drive through the crowd. A lot of that's what's really going on, by the way. That's probably for another video. But especially here in New York, in the aftermath of the defund the police program that, they were trying to initialize to bring more chaos to New York City, there were many shootings that have gone unsolved towards black people who were just walking down the street minding their own business. And they were killed by someone in a drive-by shooting. The cases were never solved. The car had tinted windows. I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out. The vast majority of shootings that occur in any major city, any major urban center in America is normally drug related or maybe woman related. But other than that, for random people to get shot down and there be no solution, no resolution to what occurred, that tells me that there's a shadow program going on to get retribution on, the quote unquote black community at large by these various police departments who are very upset. And of course, they have that little substrata within their department of white nationalists or quote unquote white supremacists which exists in just about every police department. Not saying that all police have that mentality, but there is a substrata of people with that mentality in just about every police force in America, especially within the major cities.
On this, Allie?
Well, Christina Maurice, we're told no one here was seriously injured, and tonight police are searching for that driver. The protesters were marching through Times Square in response to the death of a black man in Rochester. Daniel Prude died 5 months ago after an altercation with police, but the body cam video was just released yesterday.
Yes, the reason why it was released yesterday is because they're continuously trying to stoke the fire for chaos and for these protests. There's a certain faction behind the curtain that does not want these protests to die down. So what they're doing is they're searching the archives, or they're just holding back videos that they already know are going to be used to keep the people upset. And they bring them out whenever they see the fire starting to die down. It's like someone with a fireplace. The fire starts to die down, you throw another log on the fire.
Cell phone video shows a black car with tinted windows drive through a crowd of protesters in Times Square Thursday evening.
Now, brothers, this black window tinted car drives through the crowd in Times Square, which is pretty much the epicenter for the meeting of the masses globally. Whether you're from China, Japan, India, Zimbabwe, Brazil, when these people come to New York City, they want to see Times Square. One could consider it the commercial hub of the entire planet for the population to come and, just visit, see what's going on around the city of New York, which in and of itself is considered the capital of the world. New York City is. That's why they have the UN meetings here. So one would think that there would be more surveillance cameras, particularly in Times Square, than probably in any city on the entire planet, other than maybe some of the cities in communist China, or maybe in Tokyo, Japan. Cities that are highly mechanized and following, particular principles, especially in Beijing, highly Marxist/communist principles. They should have no problem tracking this person down. To this day, I have not heard an update on this case. And of course, they got the license plate number, so there should be no problem.
After the car in the rain, but the driver speeds off.
A black car came through the crowd and hit the person in front of me.
Brothers, people like this have no idea even what they're protesting. She's wearing a face mask that says defund the MPD. Of course, the abbreviation for the New York Police Department is NYPD, so she's probably not even from New York City. She probably came from somewhere else, which many of these protesters do. They're professional anarchists and antagonizers and provocateurs. So a lot of these liberal Caucasians, they'll fly to New York City or Philadelphia or Baltimore or Atlanta from Portland, from Seattle, from San Francisco to stir the pot and stir up drama because they have such a low level of respect for so-called black people, especially so-called black men. They don't believe that we have the ability to discuss our own issues. They don't believe that we have the ability to come to some form of a program or protocol to initialize our own problem solving. No one despises you more than the Caucasian liberal does. No one. At least for the most part, the Caucasian conservative will leave our people to our own devices. The thing with the Caucasian conservative is they're very, very hard on crime. So they want the so-called Negro to remain in a particular state of ineptitude so that they'll resort to crime, and therefore they have an excuse to lock them up. When it comes to the Caucasian liberal, they want to act as if they care about the issues and the plight within the so-called black community, and they'll make particular avenues for you to be engrafted within their world, but in return you have to accept their ideologies. That being female supremacy, homosexual supremacy, lesbian supremacy, transgender privilege. These are all trade-offs for you being welcomed into their world, to have the right to work in the mailroom in corporate America. Okay, nigga, no problem. You can work here, but do you accept the fact that women, homosexuals, lesbians, and transgenders are all above you? Not equal, above you. So that's the difference. And of course, the Democrats, they like crime as well. They make money off of the drug trade as well. But on the surface, that's the difference. Someone like this does not respect so-called black people at all. She's a cartoon character.
Me, and then I believe the person behind me, and we all had bikes, so they just came charging through. It was pretty terrifying.
And let me say this, in order for us to get the respect that we claim that we want, we have to show that we deserve respect by standing on our own 2 feet and doing what every other productive quote-unquote community does, which is start from within and work our way out. Our people are trying to solve their problems by starting from without and working their way in. So it's never going to work.
Are caught on Earth Cam can be seen whipping around the corner right after escaping the crowd. Hundreds of people were there protesting the death of Daniel Prude at the hands of Rochester police. Recently released body cam video from March shows Prude naked and yelling when Rochester officers handcuff him. They put a spit hood over the 41-year-old's head.
Now, brothers, did you hear that? Because they say quite a bit. They stated that 41-year-old Daniel Prude was out in the street butt naked, spitting at the police. Now, from a two-dimensional perspective, that's why I always state I could not be a police officer. Because if you spit at me, I have to shoot you. I'm sorry. You have to get shot. Especially in this day and age with the coronavirus and all these other things, this person could have HIV. You can catch HIV from someone spitting on you if it gets within your eyes or your nose or what have you. So he clearly has a problem. And it's not just mental. As already stated, he's a user of hallucinogenic drugs like PCP, angel dust. So you're not a responsible person. I'm sorry, I just don't feel that much compassion for hard drug users who are always looking for others to feel sorry for them. There are better ways for us to solve our problems than resorting to drugs. Now, maybe he has a bad background. Either way, once you start spitting on people, that's a major problem. From an esoteric perspective, there's a reason why they reported that he was 41. As most of you know, Kobe Bryant was also removed at the age of 41. And for those of you brothers who are from the New York area, you'll remember one of the most famous stories of quote-unquote police brutality from a little bit over 20 years ago was the shooting of Amadou Diallo. And remember, they kept talking about how he was shot 41 times. Remember that? Now, when I was younger, of course, I was not as aware of the ritualistic or the esoteric significance of these major stories as I am now. But it makes all the sense in the world now why they reported it how they did, that he was shot 41 times or shot at 41 times. Because normally, you know, when they make these reports pertaining to these news segments, they'll say how many times the person was shot. Not how many bullet holes they counted in the walls around the person who was shot up. They stated that they counted 41 bullet holes in the wall. Why would they be concerned about that unless that number had very important significance? The number 41, by the way, you know, from the Luciferian perspective, represents the quote-unquote Son of God from the standpoint of the required death or the ritualistic sacrifice for the greater good. So when Kobe Bryant was removed at 41, that was the purpose for that. He represented Horus or Heru, as I stated in many of the series that I did on that subject. Of course, also as Zeus, the great eagle, so on and so forth. I've already gone over that. Also, if you're paying very close attention, I'm not quite sure if you guys can see it, but on the police car, the number there is 011. So it would not surprise me if this was something that was set up in tandem with the police force, as well as the subject or the victim's brother may have been involved as well, may have been paid off. Who knows?
An officer can be seen pressing Prude's covered head to the ground until his body goes limp.
You hear him? Don't kill me. That was a sign right there for y'all to let up.
This all started when Prude's brother called 911 concerned about his mental state. 7 days later, a brain-dead Prude...
Now, as we can see here on the sweatshirt that they show the brother wearing, we see the winged sun disk, or the sun disk of Marduk, as well as the vesica Pisces, the interlocking circles forming the quote-unquote divine vagina or the divine feminine source of all energy. There's a reason why they posted this photo right here. He was a ritualistic removal. That's why they're bringing back up this story after how many months, 6 months now, because he was removed in March. We're now in September.
Taken off life support. The medical examiner ruled his death a homicide caused by complications of asphyxia in the setting of physical.
As we can see here, they're showing him in the all white. We know that the all white is for death and rebirth or reincarnation, as Horus or Heru. We've gone over this in other videos. Whenever you see these celebrities wearing the white hood, that symbolizes death. Sometimes for the moon goddess, sometimes to represent the removal of Osiris and his rebirth in purity as Horus or Heru.
Excited delirium and acute PCP intoxication.
I'm still waiting on him to call me and say I'm coming home.
Prude leaves behind his 18-year-old daughter, Tashira.
Now, brothers, please pay very close attention. He was removed at 41 years old. They highlight the fact that his daughter is 18. 41 minus 18 is what? 23. Right? For Hermes, or for the DNA, the intertwining serpents.
I would never get there. It's breaking my heart.
Well, the state attorney general is investigating the case, and today the mayor of Rochester suspended those 7 officers who were involved. Back here, the NYPD is asking anyone who may have been injured tonight to call police. We're live in Times Square. Ali Bauman, CBS 2 News.
Okay.
But anyway, brothers, this will probably be an ongoing series because this is certainly a theme that I've noticed, particularly in the mainstream liberal media, trying to extol the virtues of degenerate black men. They never talk about the real plight, that being the plight of the upstanding so-called black man, because that won't be as palatable for the public. There won't be as much victimizing that they can push and promote. There are so-called black men who work in corporate America, who certainly are qualified, that cannot get promotions because they're more concerned about promoting women or homosexuals. They won't talk about that. There are so-called black men who are getting raked over the coals, not just in the criminal justice system for crimes that they've committed, but getting raked over the coals by women, particularly in reference to child support and alimony. They won't talk about those things because all of those things are affecting the upstanding so-called black man, the real man. These characters that we see on TV that they're trying to make us feel so sorry for, they're not men, they're males. Nothing against George Floyd, but he was not a black man. He was a male. Running around, snorting up all type of drugs, smoking up all type of drugs, putting guns to pregnant women's bellies. I'm sorry, that's not a man. That's a male. Jacob Blake. Allegedly, the police were supposed to be more concerned about his children than he was. He was so concerned about his fucking kids that he drives over to the house of some $2 former hoe that he was dealing with, finger pops her, sniffs his fingers and says it smells like you've been with another man. All while his children are in the back seat of his vehicle. And then on top of that, he chooses to not comply with the police and put both his life and the lives of his children in danger. But these woke niggas want people to believe that the cops should have been so concerned about the children in the back seat of his car. That's if they even were aware that that was his car and that his children were in the back seat. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Either way, Jacob Blake is supposed to be more concerned than they are. Once again, in the so-called black community, they never call black degenerates coons and sellouts. Ever. They make a bunch of excuses for them. That's how you know that there's a foundational problem within the so-called black community. And, you know, not to be necessarily quote-unquote off-putting, but as I always state, and as the Bible itself tells us, many of these niggas gotta go. Most of these niggas gotta go. It is what it is. So peace.